Tonight on Evening Magazine.
Didn't want the Beach Boys to perform for July 4th in Washington because they attracted the wrong crowd.
Learn the secrets of America's band, their drug and alcohol use, and their connection with Charles Manson. And the host of Bodies in Motion is finding fitness a family affair. Then a small-town girl gets a modeling chance of a lifetime. Plus, there's some hot property for sale if you want to buy your own island. Tonight on Evening Magazine. I'm Nancy Glass. Ray Murray is on assignment. The history of the Beach Boys dates back to 1963 when they had their first hit, Surfin' USA. In the next 3 years, they had 13 songs in the top 10 and established themselves as the Golden Boys of rock and roll. Today, their annual 4th of July concerts keep up their all-American image. Now, the Beach Boys were three brothers, Brian, Carl, and Dennis Wilson, their cousin, Mike Love, and a friend, Al Jardine. But were they always just one big happy family? You're about to meet a man who says absolutely not.
I've always actually, in person, been a little frightened of Mike Love because he really looks daggers at people. Brian Wilson's a really, really wonderful and amazing and tragic person. Unfortunately, he's clinically schizophrenic. Dennis is great, was great. He was just a terrific guy who couldn't stop boozing, couldn't stop drinking, and couldn't stop womanizing. Carl's a baby brother of the Wilson brothers. Carl is a nice guy, kind of an average guy. Al Jardine is a kind of a very quiet, conservative, nice guy who was married to the same woman for about 20 years, the longest of all the Beach Boys. He recently divorced her.
By all accounts, a story about the Beach Boys should be a happy one. After all, they are America's band. 25 years after their first hit song, they are still capable of drawing hundreds of thousands of people to a concert. But the story of the Beach Boys is laced with controversy and tragedy. There is, for example, the Charles Manson connection, Brian Wilson's battle with serious mental health problems, and the drowning death of his brother Dennis. Could it really be that this band who gave us such good vibrations had a very dark side?
Well, James Watts said he didn't want the Beach Boys to perform for July 4th in Washington because they attracted the wrong crowd. I think that the Beach Boys were the wrong crowd, and that the audience probably was a lot cleaner than they were.
Stephen Gaines is the author of a book about the Beach Boys called Heroes and Villains. He says the root of the group's problems may go back to the man who raised Dennis, Brian, and Carl Wilson.
They had the most unbelievable father, Murray Wilson, who also managed the Beach Boys. Murray Wilson makes Mommy Dearest look like a cartoon because he too was an abused child. He put the Beach Boys as children through tremendous, tremendous punishment and torturous things. Murray would actually put the boys in the bathtub to beat them up, so if they kicked or screamed, they wouldn't break anything. Murray had a glass eye. When the boys were very, very young, as punishment, he would remove the eye and make them stare into the socket and wink it at them, open and close, till they would scream and not want to be with him anymore. The only way the boys could control Murray's temper, and they were afraid of this guy, the only way that they could control him was to harmonize. Music soothes the savage beast.
There's a story told of a very gentle boy.
The gentle boy referred to in this song is standing second from the right. Brian Wilson wrote the song In My Room and just about every hit the Beach Boys ever had. He was the group's composer, producer, and unquestionable leader. But a battle with severe mental problems and an increased appetite for drugs sent Brian Wilson into a tailspin. It was a downfall so severe that in the early 70s he moved a refrigerator into his bedroom, climbed under the sheets, and stayed there for 4 years. The therapy that has led to his gradual recovery had a price tag of close to $20,000 per month. It was a frightening period for a man who at the peak of his creativity was considered by many to be a better songwriter than Paul McCartney.
You know, Paul McCartney came to visit Brian many years later to tell him how much he loved his music, and Brian was so petrified that the Paul McCartney had come to his house that he locked himself in a shed behind the swimming pool, and Paul McCartney stood there knocking on the door for 20 minutes saying, "Please come out, Brian, please come out," and all they could hear were the sounds of Brian Wilson weeping.
I asked the sky just what we had.
By far the most tragic story of the Beach Boys concerns Dennis Wilson, the only Beach Boy who loved to surf. It seems as if everything Dennis did, he did excessively, including heroin, cocaine, and alcohol. It was not unusual for him to have 4 or 5 different sexual partners in an afternoon. His lifestyle is said to have infuriated Mike Love so much that fistfights between them would break out on stage. That relationship soured even further when he married and had a child by Mike Love's illegitimate daughter. But perhaps the most bizarre episode was one he would later come to regret, and that story begins one night when Dennis returned from a recording session.
He went to the studio with the Beach Boys that evening, came home at 2 o'clock in the morning, and opened up the door to his house, and there were 20 girls, half-naked girls, and one guy. And this guy fell to his knees and kissed Dennis's sneakers and said, "Brother, I will be your new friend, I will be your leader. My name is Charlie Manson." Now, at the time, Charlie Manson wasn't a mass murderer. He was just another hippie traveling around California in a school bus with a group of 20 girls. This was perfect for Dennis. In fact, Dennis was so taken by Charlie Manson as a musical talent that he insisted that the Beach Boys allow Charles Manson to record a record album. The Beach Boys loved one of the songs. Manson called it, rather ominously, "Cease to Exist." And the Beach Boys liked the melody, so they rewrote the lyrics. They changed the name to Never Learn Not to Love, and it's on the 2020 album. Dennis was a warm, wonderful, lovable guy, a man of tremendous excess.
Dennis Wilson's life ended on December 4th, 1983. After a day in which he suffered a number of alcoholic seizures, he went swimming off the coast of Southern California and drowned.
It's impossible to walk into a Beach Boy concert without feeling terrific. For the 2 solid hours that those guys are on the stage, the audience is up on their feet, jumping around, dancing, and I mean, and they deserve to be too, because the music is just fabulous.
One more story about Dennis Wilson. It wasn't unusual for him to pass a car showroom, see something he liked, and have it delivered to the studio that afternoon. As a matter of fact, one day he plunked down $78,000 for a Rolls Royce, took it for a spin, totaled it that same day, and simply left it on the median strip on the Pacific Coast Highway in California. Now, at the end of the show, we will have a special comedy video for you starring Brian Wilson, John Belushi, and Dan Aykroyd. But coming